So I think we're actually going to just jump right in, and I think we got one or two more who may be joining us. We'll let them in as we go.
I'm
But
sorry, Steve,
thank
can
you
I
all.
just ask you one thing before we go with the otter? Um, does that go out into the ether, the note taker? Because we're not supposed to,
Oh no,
stays,
sorry, what?
it stays um not into into anybody's model or anything.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Thanks. Oh, and here are our last two. Perfect. All right. So thank you all for being here. Really excited about this talk with Sharon Block. This is going to be the first of a series of talks that we're doing with people really leading their fields in areas that are important to PPP and really just important to rebuilding our democracy eventually. Um, we're really glad to have you all here. Like we said in the description, we reached out to you all. This is going to be just a kind of a smaller discussion that we are recording, so we can share it with other people. We wanted this to be kind of like intimate meeting so that you all can kind of like have your questions answered and be a part of the discussion yourselves. So we've got until 1, and I want to make sure that we leave enough time for everyone to kind of get to what they're interested in. So I will jump right in and briefly introduce Sharon. I'm going to let her tell us a little more in a moment. But Sharon Block is the professor of practice and executive director of the Center for Labor and a Just Economy at Harvard Law School. Immediately prior, she served as the administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs under President Joe Biden. She's also held senior positions in the Department of Labor, was appointed to the NLRB by President Barack Obama, and was senior counsel of the Senate Help Committees, all among many other um,
Good job.
positions as well. But yeah, very, very experienced both within the federal government and has done a lot of great work at Harvard Law as well. And she's also one of PPP's amazing board members. So we are so grateful to have you here, Sharon.
Thank you.
And really quickly, I'm going to have you all introduce yourselves also. So if you can just share your name, pronouns, where you're calling in from, and just kind of like briefly, I guess, what your interest is in the topic for today. Um, and I will go ahead and, oh, wow, that's interesting. Sorry, the Otter introduced itself. Thank you. But I can start. So I am Steve Kennedy. I'm our organizing and network director at PPP. For those of you who have not met me, I am in from Newtown, Connecticut, and I guess for my interest, I came into law school mostly interested in doing kind of like policy and government work and that kind of thing. I mean, like obviously this has been an issue for that PvP cares about a lot, and I'm really excited to have everybody here today. And I will pass it along to Pilar.
Hi, my name is Pilar Castillo. I'm calling in from Philadelphia. I work for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I also am a former federal employee from the Department of Labor, the New York State Department of Labor, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I'm interested in all things worker and consumer related, and totally energized by all the great interest there is about these issues right now. Thank you for having me.
And we can just pass on to someone else. I'll call my next person here. So Kathy.
Thanks. I'm Kathy Hanna, she, her. I'm calling in from Arlington, Virginia, just outside of DC. I'm a longtime corporate lawyer and just have a lot of interest and passion in this space and how to, I don't know, evangelize to more institutional, like corporate side lawyers of like the kind of work that we could be doing together.
Emmy.
Hi everyone, I'm Emmy. I'm currently in DC, but starting to empty out my apartment. We move to Brooklyn tomorrow. I am a civil rights attorney. I'm at a super small shop right now, focused fully on representing fired federal workers. So this specific convo feels very relevant because we need to be like fixing what is happening, but also thinking about there's like an acute and then there's like a broader systemic, like how do you get young, progressive, energized people interested in working at the federal government again after what we've seen. So that's my acute crossover. And I will pass it to Nate.
Hi everyone, I'm Nate. I am located in Minneapolis. I work at the Great North Innocence Project, and my colleague recommended learning more about PPP, so I'm here to learn more. In general, I just really feel strongly that the government and government in general is the solution to social problems and problems in the United States, and I want to see a strong and robust federal, state, and local government that is working to solve our problems. And so when I saw this webinar and the subject matter around it, I wanted to tune in and learn more about how we can make that all happen. And I will pass it to Liana. Liana.
Hi everyone, my name is Liana Maislina, she, her pronouns. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I work for Public Rights Project. I am maybe the only non-lawyer on this call, which happens quite a bit in my line of work, but Public Rights Project supports local and state government in fighting for civil rights. We work primarily with government attorneys. Pilar is one of our fellows, actually. I don't know if this is how you found out about this because I posted it to the group. Okay, awesome. So I run our fellowship programs where we support government attorneys, specifically at the local and state level, to do more for their communities, essentially. I run those programs, but I am not a lawyer. So a lot of like why I show up in spaces like this is because I just want to like give our fellows as many resources as possible and just be aware of like the ecosystem and what's out there and like opportunities and all of that to make sure that they're as empowered as they can be to do the great work they're doing. And I'll pass it to Alice.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alice Catlin, she, her pronouns. I'm actually a government attorney right now at the Department of Labor. So I have to say that any of my comments, reactions, or anything I say at all has nothing to do with the government's perspective. I learned about this group from Sejal Singh, who used to work at the Fair Labor Standards Division with me. And I just believe we're in a dire situation. My background's in workers' rights, and I believe that rebuilding government is going to take a lot of collective action. So I'm here for it. And was I the last person, or is there anybody left who needs to be introduced?
Patrick, yeah.
Oh, hi. Um,
Connection's a little
statewide
spotty.
and let me take, I'm gonna put it off on my headset. So I was involved with a bunch of lawyers to end partisan gerrymandering in Michigan. That took us about 2 years. And now the same group is doing a money out of politics statewide constitutional amendment. And I'm interested in ways to collaborate with lawyers. We took our success with doing a charter amendment, a constitutional amendment to amend our city charter in East Lansing to stop a very serious housing justice problem of criminalizing people having guests in their home. And we're now trying to shift elections to even years so Michigan State students can vote for city elections. And then we have a very severe police crisis in East Lansing. And we're trying to put on the ballot an ombudsman's office like Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids have had to create openness and transparency. And what I'm interested in is doing things in collaboration with other lawyers. And I'm hoping to learn from all of you about how to be more effective in this kind of work. That's it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. We're really glad to have you all here. And I'm going to pass it over to Sharon. If you could just, give us kind of a brief introduction, kind of like what brought you to your current work. If you want to give any highlights, things like that. And then after that, I'll have one more question, and then I'm just going to open it to everybody else.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. You all have great backgrounds and appreciate all of your service. Alice, you made me smile because Sejal was one of my very first students at HLS. So I'm glad you had the privilege of working with her because she's awesome. So what brought me to this work? I mean, I'll be I was one of those kids that wanted to be a lawyer starting when I was like 5 years old. It's all I ever wanted to do. I don't know if I really had a good idea of like what that would look like, but that did sort of drive my like early schooling and things I was interested in. And then I was always fascinated by politics. And so I knew I wanted to go to law school, but when I was in college, I tried to do things that would in make me a better law student, sort of understanding. I think I intuitively knew that I wanted to do public law, not private law. I wasn't really interested in contracts or I don't even know what those torts. I mean, the stories can be interesting, but as a subject of study, it didn't really appeal to me. And so when I was in college, I was very drawn to being in DC, being interested in public law and government. So I had two experiences during the summer that were really formative for me. One was I interned in Senator Kennedy's office. And I don't even think I realized at the time how transformative that was, but it really gave me an insight into the power of the government if it is properly harnessed, just to see, even at that time. So I don't want to tell you how old I was. So I was an intern a long time ago, but he had already been in the Senate for a long time. And just seeing the arc of his accomplishments over what having a strong, powerful voice for working people and on other issues. But for me, I was always interested in labor. So how he imagined how the government could ensure that the economy and the democracy was as fair to working class people as possible was just incredibly inspiring to me. In addition to like the people who worked for him, who worked around him, the staff. And if you had told me then that I would be one of them one day, I just like never would have believed it because they were such an amazing array of people. And then another summer, I worked for People for the American Way, which, and are you guys familiar with People for? So it's a progressive nonprofit. At that time was really focused on, this was sort of during the rise of the religious right, and was so very focused on policy around the separation of church and state, of pushing back on misinformation from the religious, what then we called the religious right. And part of another thing that People for did was advocate around judicial nominations. And again, I don't want to tell you how old I am, but let's just say there was a Republican president at the time. And so there were nominees, there were some big Supreme Court nominations fights that People for got involved in trying to inform the public. So both like an inside outside strategy. So they were very much like an insider kind of organization. But also, and after I graduated from college, I went to work for People for a little bit before I went to college. We really focused on that outside game of trying to help people understand why they should care who's on the Supreme Court and what the potential harm was of having this. All right, now you're all going to know how old I am. This was the Bork nomination when Robert Bork was nominated, and really what the consequences for the development of the law and for people would be if somebody who held Bork's views were on the Supreme Court. And so then again, that was really like having to get into that fight and really understand and internalize that message. Again, underscored for me, this is not like just about people in Congress or people on the court or lawyers who argue before the court, but this is really an issue about how people live their lives. So then I went to law school, and I know not all of you are lawyers, most of you are lawyers, so this may resonate with you. A friend once said this to me, that like when you're in law school, you quickly realize that there's thing law and people law, right? Thing law is like property torts. I mean, it kind of corresponds to private law and public law, but not directly. I knew I was a people law person in addition to being a public law person. And so for me, being a people law person, labor law just was incredibly powerful to me. The idea that most adults spend most of their adult lives at work, not at home with their families, not enjoying recreation, but at work. The idea that if you're not treated fairly in the workplace, it's just really hard to have a good life, and everybody should be able to have a good life. And so the structures that the government, that the law creates to support the idea that everybody should be able to have a decent life just was incredibly compelling to me. So, like I said, lots of different jobs, but I spent most of my early career as a career lawyer at the National Labor Relations Board. So those of you who are Emmy standing up for fired feds, like, thank you. I mean, most of my career was in the federal government, and I have just the greatest respect for career feds. And I know I was one for more than 10 years. What that's like and what's happened to them is just beyond horrifying. And then got to a point where I just wasn't, I couldn't convince myself, this was during the Bush administration, that I could defend my job at the board. I was an appellate litigator, which is great work, but I had to defend board decisions that I didn't really believe in. And no disrespect to people who made different choices, but just for me, I didn't want to continue doing that. And so that's when I left, and that's when I joined Senator Kennedy's staff now as a permanent staffer. And really loved that. And again, that same engagement with people and processes that could possibly make the economy and work more fair for people. Unfortunately, after about 3 years that I was there, Senator Kennedy passed away. Coincided with the beginning of the Obama administration, so I went into the Obama administration. Spent most of the first term at Department of Labor. So again, Alice, you just even hearing you say you're at Department of Labor, like, I know the Frances Perkins building is a dump, but it still makes me smile. We can compare notes about having, I don't know if you guys have done this, having like the cockroach races down the hall. Yeah. I had somebody on my staff once who found a mouse and wanted to keep it as a pet. I was like, no, we are not having a mouse as an office pet. No. And there was a story in the Biden administration during the Biden administration that somebody found a snake in the building. Yeah. Anyway, but it still just makes me smile because it was such an amazing experience. Spent some time again as a member of the National Labor Relations Board. So I had this looping back to places. There's only so many places you can do labor policy. And then a little time in the White House and the Obama administration, but then I was the subject of a Supreme Court decision. So if anybody wants to know about that, I can tell you it's not a lot of fun. And then I had to stop measuring the drapes for my office in the Clinton administration and figure out what I wanted to do next. And that's when I first came to Harvard Law School to run the Center for Labor and a Just Economy, and really loved it and would have been happy to stay. But the confluence of events, obviously around the 2020 leading up to the 2020 election, I think there was a sense among a lot of us that there was no time for a learning curve at the beginning of the Biden administration, that we needed folks who could just hit the ground running. If you remember, we had COVID, we had a financial disaster, we had the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. So I agreed to go back in and run, as Steve said, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, which is, people call it the most powerful agency nobody's ever heard of. It sets regulatory policy for the executive branch. But that leads me to really something I want to like put out to you as young people, younger people, certainly younger than me people. Like, I only stayed in the Biden administration for about 15 months because I have a really strong belief, and I hope the next non-insane administration really is like agrees with this, is that the same people should not be in government all the time. I mean, I could walk the halls in the White House at the beginning of the Biden administration. And again, there were good reasons for this, and I knew everybody. And like, I shouldn't have known everybody. Like, we all worked together either on the Hill or mostly in the Obama administration. And so I left after about 15 months because I had an amazing political deputy. He had never been in government before. So we spent a year making sure he knew how the building works, which it's not always intuitive, that he knew the people he needed to know. And then I was like, you know what? You go. It is your time. Which also leaves me like, people ask me all the time, well, in another administration, would you want to go in? I'm like, no, I will not go in again. I spent almost 10 years as a political appointee. Oh, Jans, hi. It's another one of my awesome students. And so I just think, to see people like all of you who are really interested in government and policy and how does the government run, like, not that you should not have any interest in what people like me, like the insights that we have, but like, it's time for different people. And in part, I'll just say this in a moment of self-reflection. Like, people like me, like, we brought us to this moment. I don't know what the hell we did, like, it was not intentional. But I think that's a pretty powerful message that, like, we need different ideas and different thinking. And that's how I spend a lot of my time now, thinking about different ways that labor laws should be configured to truly empower workers. But also, there's about 4,500 conversations going on around DC about reimagining government, reimagining the courts. I love being in those conversations, and there's a certain freedom I feel like I have in those conversations because I'm not angling for like trying to suck up for like who I think is going to be the chief of staff. Like, I can just genuinely, and I hope and again, through this lens of self-reflection, of like really think about what this is like a moment. We thought it was bad when we came back in after the first Trump administration, like the devastation, and Emmy and Allison, you guys are probably even closer to it. So it is both a tragedy, but also an opportunity. Like, we didn't do things in the Biden administration or even the Obama administration because we were like, yes, this is absolutely the best way to run a government. It's like, you have to do a million things. You just make do to a large extent with the structures that are there. The next crew is going to come in and there will be no structures. And so that's really hard, but it's also, again, an opportunity to say, not just like, what's the best I can do with the tools that I have, but like, what tools do I want to have in order to do the best I can for the American people. So sorry, that was a little long, but
No, that's
so it's been on my mind.
yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think that's like a perfect transition actually. Because like I said, I just have one quick question. I do want to make sure I just like let everyone else get to kind of their discussion here. But one question that I have that just to kind of like frame the conversation, I guess, because like you said, it's like we're kind of like going to be starting. It's like we're practically starting fresh, right? Whenever we do have a new administration that is actually wanting to have a functioning government. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about like what that did look like, like what were some of the like the functions of the government that were like most important to like actual like ordinary people that maybe they were aware of, maybe they weren't, that are now kind of, destroyed, crippled, whatever, wherever they're at. So we can move into this discussion of just like not only rebuilding what we had, but like you said, kind of like what is it that we need? But I think just like getting everyone on the same page on kind of just like where things were at would probably be helpful.
So, I mean, it's a really super
And it's a
big
huge government, so.
question. One thing I've thought about a lot is that we've all come to the realization that a lot of the guardrails on the government working at all were norms, not rules, not laws. And so we see what happens when those norms fall away. Most of it in the hands of, I'm saying this in a C3 way. Chance knows I say this all the time. Like, I don't think it's political or partisan to say that this administration has been a disaster. Most of those falling away of norms has, in their hands, has been terrible. But I think there is one thing I have to admire about them is they have found a freedom to really carry out an agenda by questioning those norms. And so I think, not to sound all abundancy, because I have a lot of questions or issues about that, but I do think we need a faster feedback loop. Like, people need to see more clearly how the government delivers on the things that are important to them. And I don't mean that in a messaging way, like in a much deeper way. And I think some of that has to come from listening more. Like, I really believe in the administrations that I worked in. I believe people came in with the right values and wanting to deliver for people in ways that would make their lives better. But at the same time, I don't think we listened enough. I think we came in with our ideas, well-intentioned, but I think even if you deliver well-intentioned policy, if it doesn't come from a place of having listened, it just doesn't, it's not meaningful to people. We're actually at the center, we're doing some research in communities that in the Midwest there were steel mills, then there were auto plants, like the steel mills closed, then auto plants opened, then auto plants closed, and then EV battery plants opened. And then some of them have closed because of the pullback on the federal investments at the beginning of the Trump administration. And I think if you came in tomorrow, I mean, we've been talking to folks about this and said, we are investing a shit ton of money in your community to do X again. And there's going to be tons of jobs and it's going to be great. They'd like roll, what we're hearing is that they will roll their eyes at that because there's just such a deep skepticism about the government now. And it's not partisan. It's really goes across the board. And so, not that you shouldn't make those big investments, but I think like a next administration really needs to know, they need to go and listen to people as they are trying to undo the damage that this administration and previous administrations honestly have done. I would say the other things that I look at are like staff. Again, this came up when you guys were introduced, staffing up. Like, there's nobody. Emmy knows there's like nobody left in the government. Like, the Justice Department is writing briefs with AI because they don't have lawyers to write briefs. I mean, they probably do a better job than anyway, I won't finish that sentence. But that is like a real classic example of both a tragedy and an opportunity. It is a tragedy for those federal and everything that we've lost with the institutional knowledge of all those federal employees. But nobody thought that the federal civil service system was like optimized. So we need to think about both how do you build a better system, but also how do you start operating from day one, knowing that there's just going to be so many fewer people on board. And maybe technology can help with some of that, but it's not going to be like the magic answer. Try not to use any gun or bullet analogies anymore, so I'm not going to say what people usually say there.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that. I think that's helpful. I think just again, like framing, what we're looking at today. So I want to open this to everybody, just kind of, thinking about the state of the federal government right now, and the kind of loss of capacity, the loss of institutional knowledge, those kinds of things that Sharon's talked about. Um, just what are some of your thoughts, questions, things like that about like how we address that, like whether it's how we address it, why it's important, things like that. Love to just kind of get a conversation started. If anyone has any questions to kick us off.
Looks like Patrick has his hand up.
I'll ask a quick question. Thank you. Um, I wanted to share just the model that I was involved in for the gerrymandering fight, because we got involved with a very large group of citizens, and we got quite a few lawyers involved, and we decided we were going to overturn the system of drawing lines and do better redistricting based on a citizens model with citizens randomly drawn and with tight rules that would guarantee a more fair way of drawing the lines. And the lawyers' contributions were incredible. I mean, I know your guest might know Sam Bagenstos. He was running for the Supreme Court at the time. But we had a chance to draw on all this lawyer expertise. We did meet with the California redistricting commissioners and the Arizona and the Alaskan. We went around the country and we worked with the Brennan Center and we worked with the ACLU. But in the end, our product was a product unique to ourselves because we did 88 town halls and we had such a huge amount of citizen involvement. And we did raise $14 million in the end, and we did get 780,000 signatures. I'm only mentioning that because it's a model that broke through the party oligopoly, because the Democrats wanted us to do something that the Ohio Democrats did and failed. It left the fox guarding the chicken coop and the legislature still drawing the lines, and left the court to decide. And we took all that away, and we had a very great success with our model. So my question is, if you're interested in a topic like I am, for example, on Supreme Court reform, and you see the Biden administration thwarting the commission and not doing some of the best ideas, and Larry Kramer and lots of leaders in the Senate, a whole group of people who are outside of the two parties want real reform, how would you get involved? I was just on a call with Senator Chris Van Hollen, who I think will be the next Senate Majority Leader, and Abdul El-Sayed. And I got the most profound, in-depth discussion of SCOTUS reform. And I want to know how lawyers can help with, in alliance with all kinds of other people. Only other example I'll give you is we fought the Saline Data Center outside of Ann Arbor that Sam Altman and OpenAI got with with Jocelyn Benson's husband, who I know really well, being a key stakeholder and taking an equity stake, and he's probably going to make 10 to 20 million on it. And they made the data secret, and our attorney general fought it. My nephew, who's a new lawyer, did the Earth Justice briefs. And, on the hot mic, Governor Whitmer, who's all down with the data centers, told Sam Altman, yeah, we get all this grassroots opposition to data centers, but we find a way to make it happen. And so we're looking for models to fight data centers, and we're looking for lawyers and a lot of other professionals to be involved. And I'm wondering what the models are.
Yeah.
That's my question.
So there's, again, a lot there, and that's amazing that you're involved in all those fights. And yeah, Sam Bagenstos is a very good friend. He sat just on the other side of me in the White House during the Biden administration when he was the OMB general counsel. I think on SCOTUS reform, I think the world has changed a lot since the Biden Court Reform Commission. The salience of it as a political issue, I think, has really changed. And, it's one reason why, I was drawn to PPP because the students who founded PPP were students of mine, and I knew how awesome they were, and I'd seen how they had a theory of change that actually worked. But I think that the being at the forefront of like making that connection in a real way for people between what happens in the courts and what happens in their lives has really evolved. You know, the Supreme Court has helped that effort by doing so many things that actually do affect people's lives. I mean, you know, ask the hundreds of thousands of Haitians who now need to, you know, are going to be forced to leave this country, and all of the people who relied on their hard work. Like, it's not theoretical anymore. So I think that's an issue that's really evolved, but I think we still need to evolve more. So getting engaged with organizations that make that connection for people. I mean, that's always been the hard thing about court reform, is making the connection between what the courts do and the real lives of people who aren't litigants in cases, who might think that's just about other like high profile issues that aren't really about them, but it is about them now, because it's been, I mean, it's probably always has been, but it's in a more profound way. And I think asking candidates, you know, it's just a topic that lots of candidates are like, I'm not, you know, I'm not a big supporter of the Supreme Court's decisions, but norms, or, you know, if we expand I mean, I don't think that expanding the court is the answer. It might be a piece of the answer, but, you know, a lot of people sort of brush off the whole court reform, like candidates brush off the whole court reform um, conversation by saying, well, if we expand the court, then they'll expand the court next time they have control. Like, that's not in like you were describing, like an in-depth, meaningful, sophisticated conversation about what the possibilities are for court reform and what it would take to really change this dynamic. So I think, you know, pushing candidates on where they really stand on doing something real on court reform is super important. On data centers, I just continue to be amazed at the political salience of that issue. It's amazing. You know, in my world, there's a little bit of a rift because there are people in the building trades and the labor movement who support building data centers, and then there's a lot of people in the rest of the labor movement who don't support building data centers. But I can't think of many issues that sort of cut across so many different people who would describe themselves as different on different points in the political spectrum, who really get it and really care. And it would be fascinating. I don't know, like, where it was, that just organic, like what gave a lift to that issue, that allowed it to sort of spring forth so dynamically in this cycle. It would be really interesting to sort of try to trace it back. But I
Just
think
in
that,
Michigan, if I could just say,
yeah.
in Michigan, we had the People's Coalition organizing the Democratic Convention, and we had 20,000 people who agreed to come to the convention. We sent buses around. But the water defense people who helped us in the bankruptcy in Detroit stopped the 480,000 homes having their water shut off, which we got the federal bankruptcy judge to do with lots of good lawyering. They had formed a network of defense of water rights and housing rights and human rights. And then the Flint water crisis, justice advocates and the Line 5, shutting down Enbridge Line 5 advocates who defend our water and defend it against just the next environmental apocalypse, which Governor Whitmer just greenlit. And then our Supreme Court said she was acting illegally and took away their power to do what they were going to do and keep this old pipeline working. All of those groups came together because it's about taking away our water, polluting it, polluting our air, raising our electric bills, making electricity unaffordable, resulting in people getting evicted from their homes, and doing it to create a jobless economy. And this network came together with the help of lawyers, really, at Earth Justice and at about NRDC. And Dana Nessel put the full force of her agency behind fighting Governor Whitmer's using secret data to jam this through. So this is by no means partisan. Both parties are all in on the 15,000 data centers being built worldwide in the leadership. And it's the insurgencies and the efforts in the courts and the grassroots movements. In Saline, they're recalling all the people elected. They are doing civil resistance, which we should be training people to do. And they are doing lawsuit after lawsuit. And we're going to make this referendums on statewide campaigns. And establishment corporate Democrats are going to lose on this. It's the live wire. And if they touch it, they're going to die. They're going to have to figure out how to get on the right side of it. And Jocelyn Benson's struggling with that. She's trying to find a way to unrig herself from her family's monetized investment in this industry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all that insight. I mean, the thing to me that's so interesting is I think what you said, it is a network. There are people coming to this issue for lots of different reasons. There are some people who come because they are outdoors people and the impact on rural communities, and there are people who are coming to because they care about the impact on water. There are people who come to it because of the, increase in energy costs. There are people who come to it because they have a deep skepticism about AI and want to stop AI companies. Often when you have like big coalitions like that, it works for a while, and then everybody starts, either the other side, the corporate side, starts sort of picking off people and saying, well, we'll cover the water costs, don't worry. And so then those people fall off, or, whatever, we'll deed land somewhere else so you can go hunting. You're not seeing that, at least so far. These coalitions against the data centers seem to be hanging together. So I think it's a really important. I don't know what the special sauce is, but I think it is a really important.
Well, it's two things, if I just might. It's that it makes climate justice goals unattainable. So it's game over for what sustains the economy and life. Really, it is that. And it's also about cementing the power of oligarchs, financial oligarchs, the wealthiest 1% or 1% of 1% who are governing us. And we saw them all behind Trump. And it's those two things. Those are the pillars. And this issue that's it. Thanks.
Oh, no, you're good. I was going to say it does really highlight kind of the importance of like local and state level organizing as well, I think, because that's what kind of sustains that longer term and people can join up and that kind of thing. I was going to jump in with a question. Chance is having audio issues, so you sent me a question here that I'm gonna toss in, changing direction just a little bit.
Used to answering Chance's question.
So, in terms of making government move faster and building faith, a lot of focus has been on things like permitting reform. What are your thoughts on tools like eliminating means testing? Obviously, it's always program dependent, and the PR gets complicated. But I'm curious if you think that is a viable short to medium term solution.
I think it's definitely it is a strategy to look at. There's lots of I think there's been lots of studies about the increasing the political viability of policies that are not means tested. Social Security, obviously, I mean, there's a small part at the very upper end of Social Security that is means tested, but it's the third rail of politics for a reason. I mean, everybody cares about it. So I think it's important. It can also obviously have a efficiency effect. I'm not sure that's, I think of it more as like there's efficiency just for the sake of making the government more efficient. What I'm interested in is a lot of programs, especially for lower income people, are trapped in this cycle of it fits into a concern about fraud, waste, and abuse, right? And so we have whole structures within the government to make sure that people who aren't entitled to benefits do not get them. And I'm not saying like people who aren't entitled to benefits shouldn't get them. We do very little on the other side to make sure that people who are entitled to benefits do get them. So it's not considered fraud, waste, and abuse. The fact that I think it's about 50% of people who are entitled to unemployment insurance never claim it. Well, that seems like a poor, I mean, call it whatever you want. That's a poorly designed program. Now, if means testing is part of what impedes the hurdles that people have to get over to get benefits, is part of what makes it that makes it hard for people who are entitled to benefits to get them, then I don't know if you call that efficiency or equity, but I would love an administration to care more about access to benefits as to dealing with fraud, waste, and abuse. They're both, I mean, again, I'm not saying that fraud, waste, and abuse isn't important, but they're both important. And we need strategies. We have strategies to deal with fraud, waste, and abuse. We don't have strategies to deal with, or good strategies to deal with access, because traditionally people just haven't cared as much.
Their thoughts, questions.
I can jump in with something that's been on my mind, and maybe it's moving us in a bit of a different direction. But one of the things that I think about when I think about hopefully 2029 and rebuilding the federal government is building it, there's having this be sort of a blessing in disguise or whatever other silver linings sort of phrases we use to reshape the government in a way that I think we as progressives want to do. And so I think about like this could be, assuming that there's a administration that's going in a different direction in 2029, this could be a chance for us to like reimagine the role and scope of government of the federal government. And I think now, there's so many there's so much tradition in the federal government of the government is like us, we think of the government as like a smallish entity that when they need someone to run an airport, they outsource that, or when they need someone to do any of the many things that government does. But what if we reimagine the federal government as instead of hiring contractors, of expanding to become sort of those contractors itself, so that private entities are not making money on the backs of just like what we as a society and as a government need to have happen in the first place. And so I hope that in 2029, or as starting in 2029, that we reimagine the scope of government and we see it as that everyone is scared of the word like nationalizing, but like we see things like, okay, this industry is like necessary to our citizenry, like your local energy company and that kind of thing. Why don't we in the federal government and at state government levels, why aren't we like providing that, or why aren't we reimagining what the government looks like to provide some of those services such that we're not enriching other people by paying funds out of the government. So that's what I hope when we like rebuild the government in 2029, that's what I hope we can see happen.
No, that's great. I think those are the kind of questions that our nominees are gonna have to contend with, of like, how do they think about what the role and the shape of the government should be, again, because there's been so much devastation, because it goes back to what I was saying, is like there's a tragedy to that, but there's also an opportunity to that. I think one challenge, just thinking about from a practical perspective, is whoever comes in 2029, I think we can expect will be facing a significant number of crises. We will for sure have a worsening climate crisis. We will probably have a fiscal crisis. We will have, most relevantly, a government capacity crisis. And so I would say, let's not say 2020, like it's 2029 to 2033. Like there's a next administration is going to have to walk and chew gum, quickly delivering for people what is most important to them. I would imagine some of that is going to be dealing with affordability, because I think that crisis is going to remain, while putting in place these strategies that just honestly will just take a little bit of time. I mean, restructuring the federal government, it's a big thing, even as it's shrunk under this administration. So I think it's going to be a really interesting challenge of like, what do you do first? How do you deliver on some of these really critical needs of people in the midst of these crises? I do a lot of work now in my center on occupational exposure to extreme heat. I mean, we've all lived through this summer. It's been crazy hot. And that's only going to be worse. So it's good to push, and we want candidates who have a commitment to doing the hard work of really reimagining what the government should do, what the role of the government and then the corresponding shape of the government should be. But then my brain goes to like, I knew what it felt like. We were talking about Sam Bagenstoss, Sam and I, and at OMB on January 21st, 2021, there were about 12 of us in all of 12 political people in all of the Office of Management and Budget. We turned our computers on at 12:01 and we were like, holy shit, there's no vaccine. Like, this is now our problem, dealing with COVID, dealing with financial crisis, and dealing with post George Floyd on top of everything else the government just has to do. It's a lot. So I don't know. That's just where my brain is going, is like and that's a lot of the work there. Like I said, there are about 7,000 conversations going on in DC now about what are plans for how to navigate that moment. And a lot of really great, some not so great thinking, and a lot of really great thinking. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins out, those who want to sort of just go back status quo ante with some window dressing, and who really wants to do the hard work of thinking about how we could do things really differently and better.
Alice?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a very encouraging conversation in the sense of like we're imagining a better future, but the whole conversation is predicated on the assumption that we will have a new administration with new goals and beliefs and fundamental values, and thinking about the multiple crises we're living through right now and trying to create collective action to fight everything from data centers to turning out the vote when our population is exhausted. Like, how are we going to do that? Like, continue to push progressive candidates, supporting people in our own communities through like self-funded solidarity. Like, how are we even going to get to this point where rebuilding is an option?
Seems like a long way off. I mean, I wish I knew the answer to that. I mean, being a labor lawyer, probably not a surprise that I think collective action is the only way to really bring about significant political change. And so finding like, what does that look like for you? Does it look like, if your workplace is unionized, getting involved with your union, finding those groups that are working on issues that you care about? But obviously, I mean, this is not an accident. This is actually part of the plan, right? To exhaust communities so that they're less vigilant, that they're less resilient to be able to demand that things change. So this is hard. I will tell you, I don't, right? Sorry, some ambient noise. Right after the election, 2024 election, the first thing I did, and like trying to pull myself out of the sadness and the really just despair, and that feeling of like, how can we, like, where do we go? What do we do? Is I read the recent biography of John Lewis, which was just incredibly inspiring. I mean, like, Americans have done really hard things before in the name of, bending the arc of justice. And as hard as what we're facing is, like, he got up every day and, went to work to try to bend that arc. And so that arc probably felt even, even less pliable than the arc that we need to bend now. So I tried to take inspiration from that Americans are incredibly resilient people. And we have done really hard things before, but this is hard. There's no magic answer. It's just hard. But I think there's a lot of reason to believe that on the other side, like, there will be more reason. I think we will clarify what's important to us as a nation as a result of this experience. At least hopefully a majority of people will have. And that so maybe there's something better on the other side. Otherwise, I can't get out. I have to say that, or I can't get out of bed in the morning. I'll just put the covers back over my head.
Christine.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Christine. I'm with the National Association of Consumer Advocates. I'm sorry
Oh,
I missed
awesome.
most of this. We're responding to an emergency, the CFPB attacking itself again. So we were just responding to that. So, the CFPB, I'm here as from the economic justice angle. The CFPB is an agency of attorneys, an agency of really committed lawyers who have been attacked from the
The
beginning
call is
of
coming from in the house.
yes, right. And they're very committed to the agency. A lot, some have left and reluctantly, um, and they're in the union is in a lawsuit against the once acting director, and I'm so sorry I missed so much of the conversation, but I was looking at the AI notes just now. Um, but that angle and what that looks like next year, or I mean 2029, and even when a new Congress comes in, hopefully, um, there is going to be a lot to do, and it's always been since last year, it's been a concern about the abuse that CFPB employees have undergone. That there will be a reluctance for them to return to the federal government. I think for all the experienced people who are now in the private sector, why should they go back? So what are the proposals for Congress to incentivize really experienced people committed to the public interest? What are the incentives for them to return or to even take jobs in the federal government? I
Yeah.
think that's a concern.
No, it's a very valid concern. I'll just tell you quickly because I know we're just about out of time. When we came in at the beginning of the Biden administration, we assumed that we meaning like political appointees, were going to be welcomed as like, oh, you've saved us. And that is not, I mean, there was a little bit of that, but by and large, career people were like, we can't trust you. We couldn't trust them. And we're not ready to trust you because we've seen what political people do. Now, this is like a whole other level, but I don't think that people in the next administration can assume that federal employees are going to be like, oh, it's all better now. We're going to come back in. So I think I mean, I know there are a lot of people thinking about this. It's going to be a real challenge. And I wish I had an easy answer, but I think there is space for civil service reform to make the process, make the experience certainly more efficient in terms of bringing people in and more humane once they're in. And maybe even thinking about ways, if there aren't the same level of people who want to come in, thinking about how do you collaborate with community-based organizations to like fill in those gaps. I don't know. It's a hard one. But thank you for raising it. It's really important. I think we're at time. Oh, we're a minute over.
Oh, sorry. Um, Yeah, so there's I feel like we could talk about this all day, but we are at time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, Sharon, and all of you for joining. I think if anyone has, I didn't ask you this beforehand, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to send them to me. I can,
course.
pass that along to Sharon, if you have other things that we didn't get to. Um, and hopefully we can, maybe we'll see some of you in future talks. And Sharon, thank you so much for being with us and for all the amazing work you do.
Thank all of you for all the great work you do.
Thank you.